Let me take you back to 2006, when I was a 9 or 10-year-old little Mario nerd. My family had driven quite a while together to reach my nan's house, where we would be staying over for the next week. I always loved going there, and this time was extra special because my nan had bought me a new game. I loved Mario. All the Mario games I had played so far were all fun and cheerful, and I thought I understood exactly what Mario games were. But soon I would experience a completely new kind of Mario game I'd never played before. I was about to play my first ever RPG, a game that would engage me more than any game prior, a game that would make me laugh, and a new enemy race that intimidated and terrified me like no other in a Mario game, the Shroobs. As a kid, I always thought the Shroobs were really cool, scary baddies, and I even made some of my own hand-drawn comic books about the Shroobs who survived the game. Partners in Time really inspired my imagination, and I remember being disappointed when the big new 3D Mario game that literally takes place in space didn't feature them. I wasn't aware of the segregation between the RPGs and the main games back then. Still, it would have been cool to have a galaxy that takes place in the Shroobs' dying abandoned planet. But since then I've had a long time to think about this weird race of aliens that randomly appeared in one game and were then hardly ever referenced again, and I've come to the conclusion that they're the most evil villains in all of Mario, and that Alphadream did a stellar job at making them extremely intimidating. My first observation about them is that they're clearly a very militant, xenophobic and genocidal race, which is obvious from their initial invasion onwards. Perhaps the most interesting about their initial invasion is what it shows us about the two nations of the Mushroom world. The Mushroom Kingdom has little to no defences and a pathetic and cowardly populace who can't fight back, so the Toads are all overwhelmed with extreme ease, and the castle and town are taken over. Bowser's Kingdom, however, actually having military capabilities, are able to combat the Shroobs, at least to a point, and after taking down Bowser's Koopa Cruiser, they make no effort to invade his kingdom, presumably because they fear his strength. Makes you wonder, if Bowser and Peach were to ally with each other, the Mushroom world would be a much safer place. The game wastes little time showing you just how merciless the Shroobs are. You don't get to see much of their actual invasion, but boy do you see the aftermath of it. Very early in the game, you arrive at what was a cheerful Christmas-themed village, but all that's left is craters, wrecked buildings, and not a soul in sight. The atmosphere is chilling. The music is a haunting rendition of Jingle Bells. Needless to say, this was the point in the game where I realised that this wasn't the kind of Mario game I'd come to expect. And these weren't the kind of villains who are content with simply taking over the world. They were out for blood. You also later on get to see the devastation they caused in Toad Town, which is still a barren and lifeless locale save for the two survivors running the shop, but it's much later on in the game, so it doesn't have as much of an impact. Although it's true the Shroobs cause a lot of destruction, it's what they do after the invasion that really shows their lack of humanity or empathy. It's made clear that they have no respect for other forms of life. Heck, their leader doesn't even respect the lives of her subordinates. When Toads are captured by the Shroobs, they're not imprisoned or executed. Instead, they're put into Toadwood Forest, where the genetically engineered trees restrain them and usurp their life force to power the Shroob ships. I honestly think the Toadwood Forest is the darkest part of any Mario game that I've come across. The Toads attached to the Toadwood trees are motionless, and slowly turning into wood. Some of them can be spoken to, and all they have strength to say are whispered cries for help and comments on how their life is being drained away. Also, this poor guy has an itchy nose. But most of the Toads are already lost, forever part of the trees, grim monuments to the Shroob's barbarism. To them, the Toads are nothing more than raw materials, things to be converted into something more useful and burned to power their ships. You know, for kids! Later in the game, the Shroobs get even more creative with their genetic engineering and create a variation of the Yoshi species called Yoob. Barney the dinosaur here was created for the purpose of eating regular Yoshis, and while inside the beast, the Yoshis would be put in eggs and transformed into more Yoob. Essentially, Yoob was a living weapon designed to create more of its kind, and capture enemies by eating them so the RC Shroobers and Sunnyside can deal with them. Another example of the Shroobs having no respect for life forms besides their own. All this stuff is definitely enough to make one hate the Shroobs, but what makes them intimidating, at least to me, is their mystery. In the Mario RPG games, a big part of the structure that differs from the main games is how they explore the character of the villains. In the first 3 Paper Mario games, we literally got interludes between the chapters where we'd go and see what the bad guys were up to, getting a look into their plans, motives, and personality that's not possible when we face them in a purely antagonistic way when we meet them as Mario. And although the Mario and Luigi games do stuff like this less than Paper Mario, we still always get a good look at the villains and come to understand their personality and motivation. And that motivation is normally conquest. Cackletta is self-absorbed and fairly gullible. It's clear that Fawful is the real brains behind the operation. Fawful is ludicrously intelligent and eccentric. With a few years of planning, he was able to bring the mushroom world to its knees, without needing any kind of special powers other than his intellect and cunning to accomplish it. And Tasma is more passive, allying himself with Bowser, and not minding him being the one in charge of their campaign, so long as he can fulfill his personal goals. But the Shroobs are different. Sure, we get to understand their main goals through their actions, but throughout almost the whole game, we're unable to understand a word they say because they speak a different language. They cannot be understood, nor can they be reasoned with. The only thing we know about their intentions is that they want to destroy us. Is Princess Shroob giving a sad speech lamenting the death of her home planet? We don't know. Are these Shroobs communicating about how they're going to surprise attack and kill us right under our noses? We don't know. And the unknown can be very scary. Not being able to communicate with them prevents us from empathizing with them. All we know is that we are hated by them. Their goal, as we can gather from the atrocities they've already committed, is the complete annihilation of all life on this planet besides themselves. And really, that's all we need to know in order to fear them. This isn't some goofy character bent on world domination. These are genocidal people who want us dead. And that's far more terrifying than knowing what they're saying. Count Bleck may have been a far higher stakes villain, but in the end we understood him as a sympathetic individual who was driven to do those hateful actions from lost love. When he found out Timpani was alive, he welcomed defeat and even saved all worlds in the end. Dementio may have been manipulative, backstabbing, and ultimately willing to cause ultimate destruction, but the cruelty he inflicted on others doesn't come close to what the Shroobs did. And there's lots of confusion about his past. It's very possible that traumatic experiences drove him to be the way that he is. Super Paper Mario lore is confusing, but I did guest star in a video made by Game Domain that explains it better if you want to go watch that. The Shroobs interest me because they're not just some quirky fun villain who just wants to rule the world like Bowser or Fawful. Nor can they be understood. The only thing we know is that they're an alien culture bent on exterminating everyone else in the mushroom world. They are vicious, potent, remorseless killers. They didn't respect the lives of the toads they drained to power their ships. They weren't above transforming helpless Yoshis into killing machines to aid their conquest. They never hesitate to use deadly force. And the fact we can't understand their language makes them all the more intimidating and terrifying. It's a kind of evil that's never been seen before it in a Mario game, and I doubt we ever will again. Well, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed my take on the Shroobs. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell if you're interested in seeing more deep discussions on the Mario franchise, as well as gameplay and discussion videos for Mario and other Nintendo games too. There's also a link to my Instagram in the comments, where I post my pixel art drawings and comics, like the thumbnail and the various pieces of artwork I drew for this video. Do you agree with me? Perhaps you think Dementio is the most evil Mario villain. If you have any thoughts or points for discussion, do be sure to leave them in the comments and I'll respond. Thank you ever so much for watching right to the end, and until next time, farewell everyone.